How's it going, guys? It's another week, which means it's another week for a Destiny build. This week, we're going to be taking a look at the old reliable Stasis Turret Warlock build. But first, again, I always want to say thank you for the support. Like if you found this helpful, comment if you want to see some other things that you may have in mind, and subscribe if you found this helpful. Now, for stuff that's coming, I have a hunter build that I'm working on, and I have my part 2 to build crafting with the mods. Now, I'm also debating on whether or not I want to make a third version of that and make it so it's like a how to put it all together type video. Like you take your elemental affinity mod, you take your armor and you take your mods and you put them together and to make a build. But we'll see about that. Not too sure how I'm going to go about that, but we'll see. But for now, let's get into this build. So this build requires really just two things. It requires Eye of Another World, which has the exotic perk Cerebral Uplink, highlights priority targets, and improves the regen speed of your grenade, melee, and rift abilities. Now this is a 9% regeneration speed. So basically, whatever your discipline mod is, you get an extra 9% on top of that. It's really cool. It's really good. And then the second part to this is Bleakwatcher Turret. Press and hold the grenade button to convert your grenade into a stasis turret that fires slowing projectiles at nearby targets. This is really good for Grandmaster content and locking down the enemies. It doesn't do a lot of damage, A lot of people are like, oh, use Verity's Brow with this. I'm not going to run Verity's Brow with this because that, grenade increases grenade damage. Yes, it increases the cooldown speed of your grenades as well, but so does Eye of Another World. And Eye of Another World also increases rift regen, which is also really helpful for those higher end contents. Another thing that I use differently is people will use Ice Flare bolts to spread that freeze around. I use Glacial Harvest. Freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. Now the reason for this I will explain when we go over the mod section of this build. If you've seen other mods from me for Stasis build, you already know what I'm going to use. But now let's go over our whispers. I don't know exactly what they're called. I think they're the aspects, whatever they're called. Whisper of Bonds. Defeating frozen targets grants you super energy. Self-explanatory. Bleakwatcher freezes. You kill it. You get super energy. Whisper of Durance. Slow from your abilities last longer. For those abilities that linger, the duration will also increase. I believe this also increases the duration of your Bleakwatcher. I'll be honest, haven't tested it. I don't know off the top of my head if this is really going to work, but I use it, so it works. And then we have Whisper of Hedrons. Dramatically increased weapon stability, weapon aim assist, mobility, resilience, and recovery after freezing a target with stasis. Your Bleakwatcher turret is going to proc this constantly. You are almost always going to have those bonuses. As a Warlock, your recovery is already going to be high, but your mobility and resilience may be lacking. This is going to boost those to make it a little better to deal with those higher end content enemies, as they have a tendency to hit harder. And then Whisper of Conduction. Nearby stasis shards track to your position. This is just because we're making shards and we want to have those shards come to us instead of us going to them and putting ourselves in risk. Now occasionally you may have to move, for the stasis, for you to tell the stasis shards, hey stupid, I'm over here, and then they'll track to you. Now we're going to move on to the armor mods that I have used. Elemental Shards. Become charged with light by picking up an elemental well. If the elemental well's elemental type matches your subclass element, you gain 2 stacks of charge with light. This is just so you can become charged with light, as it says. Now, how are we gonna make these wells? You're gonna see here in a minute. On my arms, I'm also gonna run Grenade Kickstart. When your grenade energy is fully expended, you gain grenade energy. So if you hold your turret and throw it, that's expending your grenade. So then you get, I think it's like an 1/8 of it back. So between getting an 1/8 of it back, having a 9% cooldown, and having higher tier discipline, you are going to get your grenades, but your turrets essentially back really, really fast. This can only be applied to your Stasis Affinity arms. No other armor can have this. And then I used Elemental Shards. Stasis Shards count as Stasis Elemental Wells for you. So this is why we're making Stasis Shards, to make wells to feed our other mods, which would be Font of Wisdom. Picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants you a temporary significant increase in your intellect, improving the recharge rate of your super. This is to get your super back. Your super is one of the most helpful tools you can use in a Grandmaster or higher end content thing. And having it or not having it can make or break that run. You know, let's say you have two teammates down and you're super, you pop it, you can go out and you can res them. Especially with Shadebinder, you can freeze all the enemies and have an easier and safer time resing your friendlies. So between this and Whisper of Bonds, you should have a fair amount of super energy back at any given time. And then we have Protective Light. While charged with light, you gain significant damage resistance against combatants with your shields are destroyed. This effect consumes all stacks of charged with light. The more stacks consumed, the longer the damage resistance lasts. So we're getting 2 stacks of charged with light because we're picking up Stasis Elemental Shards, and those count as wells. They match our subclass type. We get 2 stacks charged with light. When our shields break, we get the extra, resistance from Protective Light. Now, as a side note, some people still don't know this, but when you use it and you are guaranteed to be one-shot, it does not take your charge with light and it does not activate Protective Light. You will literally just become a ghost floating there waiting for your teammates to bag you and res you. That's all it's going to be good for. And then Resonant Siphon, which is off the artifact this season. Stasis ability energy, or gain stasis ability energy whenever you remember your fire team stunts a champion. So basically, you're like this week, Devil's Lair. You're running through, you stun a champion, and you've already thrown your grenade, you get a little bit of grenade energy back. You get more turret energy back. Another thing too is if you keep freezing like overload champions and they become unstunned, you can keep stunning them and basically farm your energy back. So keep that in mind too if you're feeling like that. And then I ran Well of Ordnance. Picking up a Solar Elemental Well grants you additional grenade energy. Multiple copies of this mod increase this effect. I ran this because my friend and the build he uses, he makes a ton of solar wells. So I was getting my grenade back a lot. So there's so many turrets out and about. It made the room inside the GM this week where you have to wait for the security gates to finish made it really easy. Everything was frozen. You just shatter them. I could get my super back really fast, get my grenade energy back really fast. Another thing you can do with this build that I actually just thought of is when you destroy a stasis target and they explode, that counts as an explosive damage. So you can make your own solar elemental wells by using Explosive Well Maker, which I probably don't have an asset for to throw up on the screen because I just thought about this while recording my voiceover. What you can do is you can use Explosive Well Maker, and if you kill and destroy a frozen target and a group of other enemies, they will then have a chance to drop a Solar Elemental Well, which then you can use for Well of Ordnance on yourself. The grenade launchers count also. Basically, if it's anything that has like a boom effect to it, we'll make a solar well. Another thing I really like to do with this build is not really a GM version of this build, but it's really fun. What you need a Peace Bond, the Iron Banner sidearm, which conveniently Iron Banner is up this week, so go get yourself one of these with Headstone. And then you're going to want to use Whisper of Chains and Whisper of Shards. Whisper of Chains gives you the resistance, and the Whisper of Shards gives you grenade energy cooldown when you destroy a shard. And Headstone, when you kill an enemy, when you defeat a combatant with a headshot, they then turn into a stasis crystal. So then you break that crystal, get grenade energy back, and you just carry on from there. It's really fun, and you can even swap out like Protective Light for Energy Converter. When you throw your grenade, you consume your stacks of light and get super energy back up to 50%. So you can just do some wild stuff with it. It's so much fun. Albeit it's not quite a GM build because you don't have any kind of like survivability. You don't have much survivability, and sidearms do have unstoppable mods on this season, but I don't really feel too safe running a sidearm for unstoppable. I would rather run the fusion rifle or the pulse rifle, even at that. But that's it. That's what I use for my Stasis Turret Warlock. I've used this for a little while now, working out what works well and what doesn't. Obviously, you can use whatever mods you have, whatever mods you want to use. It's up to you entirely, but this is what I use and I find to be very successful. Obviously, for weapons, it doesn't matter too much unless you want to do the Peace Bond route with the chains and shards. Other than that, just use stuff you need for champions. Like I use Le Monarch because, the Monarch is probably one of the better bows this season for Overload. It's kind of like an internal struggle. Which one do I like better, Tiku's or the Monarch? But with that being said, though, that's it. That's what I use. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it gave you a few ideas. I know it's kind of like the run-of-the-mill Warlock Stasis build, but it is what it is, and I hope you enjoyed.